Hey, everybody, welcome to a new episode of the Hemmings Hot Rod Barbecue Podcast. I am here with one of my dearest friends, Elana Scherr, features editor for Car and Driver, the queen of analog transportation, but lover of new cars as well. So, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Mike. Thanks for having me on. I'm coming to you from the back seat of a 1915 Dodge Brothers touring car. A lot of people don't know this, but when the Dodge Brothers, designed their first automobile, they were like, let's make a seat that will perfectly hold a laptop and be exactly the right distance to do a Zoom call.
Exactly. And it works out fantastic. Obviously, you're sitting in the Dodge in your shop, right?
That is correct. There's a little bit of Nova back there, just so Chevy guys. I don't want you to out and
right. So I figured today, Elana and I are both huge fans of older cars. Yes, we like new cars, but we do tend to gravitate to older stuff, as most people know if they follow us on social and read our stuff, whatnot. And I wanted to talk about the difference between an analog driving experience, analog cars, and newer vehicles. Now, Elana is now sitting in probably the most analog car on the planet because it's over 100 years old, right? And that doesn't really get more nut and bolty than that thing, does it?
I mean, not too much. I mean, I could have a Model T, I will say, and this was stuff that I learned when we bought this car, which was recently, that the Dodge for that time period would be familiar to somebody who's driving a modern car right now. I mean, I'm not saying that they would not be working hard, but the pedals are laid out the same way, it's like clutch, brake, gas, they work the same way. There are a couple of things that you do on this car that you don't have to do in a modern car, like set your spark advance, and the shifter is sort of a funny pattern, but it all works in a modern way. There are slightly earlier cars where, the thing that looks like a shifter is actually like controlling your throttle, and like the pedals are all in different places and you're doing hand controls. So that's probably even, I guess they're both analog, but as far as being fully human controlled, can get a little bit harder than what I'm in right now.
Oh, but that's pretty close. I mean,
pretty close, yeah.
Right? Because at that 1915, people were still, driving around in horses and buggies in the majority of the United States and beyond.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was reading sort of period literature about this car, and there's a lot of advertisements for horns and noisemakers, because you just know when you're gonna like come around a corner and there's gonna be a flock of sheep or a bunch of pigs.
Right.
You got to be ready.
So aside from headlights, does it have any type of, does it have brake lights? Does it have signals? Does it have any of that?
It does have one brake light in the back that says, it's that beautiful old round red one that says stop when it lights up.
That's great.
In the glass, it says stop. This particular car has an electric start, which is
wow. And that was factory?
Could get it.
Wow. Okay.
So that's exciting. And then someone has modified this one, so it currently has an electric fuel pump. I think originally you would have been pressurizing the tank by hand. So, I'm a little spoiled. I get it.
So what is it like to drive? Right. And give us an idea of kind of the procedure, right? Everything is made of canvas and metal. You big wood spoke wheels, right? Wooden spoke wheels?
Right, yeah.
Big
old wood wheels.
Big old wood wheels. What is it like to drive? And I guess more importantly, is it still fun to drive? Because every time the videos that you have, and if you haven't been to challenge her on YouTube, you really need to go to Elana's YouTube channel and see her and her husband Tom. All the stuff that they have is on there, but she gets so excited when she's behind the wheel of these things, and it's kind of infectious. So walk us through the process of like driving a 100+ year old car, and if it is fun.
It's so fun. It's fun from the second that you sort of walk up to it and you open the little carriage door and you get in. Everything has a real sort of ASMR satisfying feel to it. The latches and everything, they make like really nice sounds, and they're metal and they feel good in your hand. The wheel is like big and wooden, and it's sort of an oval shape, like the wood itself carved in this oval shape. It fits like perfectly into your hand. And there's sort of a little bit, things are a little bit ship-like, like old,
Okay.
a lot of brass and
Yeah.
faceted glass and stuff. So you get in and, you sort of, there's a lot of things to set to get ready, that because it has an electric fuel pump, like reach down, like pull on the fuel pump, and then, set the spark, and then bring the throttle up a little bit, and then you press the foot starter button, and first you got to make sure it's in neutral, right?
Right.
There's no like safeties on it. It does have an emergency brake, so then like you get it started, and then you change the spark, it's for running, because it's a little different to start it than it's to run it. Like release the parking brake and start sort of letting the clutch out. And I mean, it is a grabby clutch, so it moves out when
Right.
when you get it going. And then it's all about kind of relaxing and looking ahead. It's a lot like driving a very high powered sports car on a track.
Okay.
Except you're only going 30 miles an hour.
Right, of course.
But it's that same sense of concentration and awareness, because you do not want to hit a big pothole with this car. You do not want someone to pull out
Right.
unexpectedly. So if you could imagine the same mental speed of driving 100 miles an hour in like a McLaren,
Yeah.
sort of slowed down for the outside world, but your brain is still going just as fast, and it's really fun.
So is it chain driven or is it shaft driven?
Oh man, you are asking me some questions that I really should know the answer to.
Let's say for argument's sake, it's chain driven, and that will, I'll totally take the brunt on that because I know absolutely zero about cars from that era.
Can I see? I can't quite see around.
Is there?
Tell you.
So let me ask you, you had mentioned like you don't want to hit a pothole or anything like that. So how is that? Because suspension wise, I mean, I've seen all these different videos online of articulation and stuff like that, because these cars, when they were new, really drove so much on dirt roads because majority of the roads in the United States weren't paved, right? So how is the ride? How is the driving experience with this thing?
The ride is actually surprisingly good. It soaks up a lot of the smaller bumps, and it rides very flat, surprisingly flat. It doesn't rock around a lot. And it feels very sturdy. I mean, this thing has lasted 108 years, and it is still running. Like we didn't get it in pieces. It came to us as a complete car. I haven't experienced a really long drive in it yet. It's a very new baby. That is my excuse for not knowing everything about it. So
solid excuse, fine. Or well,
but infested with rats. As you but yeah, it's so when we have driven it surprised me with how sort of straightforward it's been, and how well it drives. You get a lot of wind in your hair and your face, and but it's not uncomfortable. Like but and if you're riding in the back, you feel like you're kind of like
you want to just randomly wave to everybody just because.
And everybody wants you to wave to them too. We just got a pamphlet. Tom, my husband, just found an original pamphlet. The Dodge dealer who sold this car in, I think, 1916 or 1917, they did a media sort of stunt where they drove a new Dodge Brothers car across Death Valley.
Wow.
And, yeah, it looked so hard. I mean, they did like sand dunes and stuff. I mean, Death Valley is a difficult place to drive right now. In a modern, Jeep Wrangler with all the bells and whistles, and people were doing it back then in these cars. So I feel like anything that I would complain about, I just need to be like, I just need to toughen up.
How fast does it go? Like, can you cruise at like around town speeds?
Yeah, you can. The speedometer goes to 60. We've done about 40 in it.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, it will absolutely maintain on a road. I mean, I certainly wouldn't take it on a freeway if I had any other option.
Right.
The hardest parts about it in contemporary traffic are starting, because people are not prepared for a car that doesn't immediately move out when the light turns green. So
Yeah.
If you have somebody who doesn't have a sense of joy in their life, they get frustrated with you while they're waiting for you to get speed. And it's not even that bad. I mean, there are cars from like the 80s that weren't much faster
totally
out than this, but people get a little impatient on that. And and obviously it doesn't have synchronized gears. So gear shifts, you have to be in the right speed. Downshifts are very challenging. And so if you do get flustered, you really have to like take a deep breath and get your body and your mind back in order, because otherwise you're just going to be grinding gears, and panicking, and yanking on the wheel, and hitting the wrong pedal. So it's sort of a meditation exercise to drive it around.
That's got to be fun as all hell. I mean, it really does. I mean, and I think that's one of the things about, obviously that's about as analog as you can get. But if we want to bump up, let's bump 50 years. Let's go to the mid 70s, right? I mean, that's kind of where I showed up. Are
you a mid 70s model, Mike?
I'm an early 70s. I'm a very early 70s model. Yeah. Yeah. Stuff from everything up until that point, up until the 60s and the 70s was still, again, very analog, right? We're still using carburation. We're still using linkage. We're still, yes, I mean, technology is advanced, but leaf springs are still in kind of the same spots and whatnot, right? So how has that driving experience from the 1915 up to, say, the Opel, for instance, right? Because the Opel's such a great, cute little sports car. It's just a fun little thing. How is it? Is the Opel so much different, or is it more similar than people would think?
That is a really good question. So 1971 Opel GT, is it closer in driving experience to this 1915 Dodge, or is it closer to, say, like the
say something modern
that I drove the other week?
Yes, exactly. Perfect.
Gosh. I would say it really is in between. I think it's probably closer to a modern driving experience, in my opinion, just because you have more things that the machine can do for itself. Really the non-synchronized transmission is a big deal. I think that is a very noticeable change in driving. You can be a much worse manual driver in even a 70s 4-speed than you can be in one of these very old cars. They start pretty similarly, I guess, really. You still got to pump the gas on the Opel and turn the key just right. But I think the thing to me about the new car driving experience that is the most different, and that really only started probably in the maybe 10 years ago, is you can pay a lot less attention now in a new car.
Yes, sure.
I think the changes in brakes and stability control are probably the most radical difference in driving a new car. Because even if you were driving, say, an early Viper or or a Mustang or something, like you still had to pay attention. You could flat spot the tires if you slammed on the brakes, if you went around the corner and you lifted in the wrong spot, in a 911 from
the 80s or beyond.
Yeah, or even before, in the 90s, you could turn the tail around on that. And then if you get in a car that has a really sophisticated stability control system now, they will save you and you will not even know you've been saved.
Right.
Like that's what I think is so incredible about them. But also, you have to go so fast to scare yourself now. Before you can get a wiggle at like 45 miles an hour if you went into a corner wrong, and you'd be like, oh, this is not a 45-mile-an-hour corner. And now you can go into a corner like totally wrong line. Just big old goober at like 80, and you'll be like, I'm really good at this. I should be a car driver.
Well, it was very funny. Last weekend, we had done this. We were very fortunate. We got invited to go on this rally from Motul. And it was It was from the Bay Area down to Laguna Seca for the IMSA race, and it was great. So we took the Charger, which, I mean, you have a Charger, you know exactly what they're like to drive. Pretty terrible on its best day, but in a good way. It's like the best terrible experiences you can have. That's kind of what I try to tell people. So anyway, we show up and there's obviously Lamborghinis and there's Ferraris and there's blah, 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 blah. And then there's a big black car with a double pumper and a big block in the front with torsion bars. And we were kind of going through these back roads, and I was working. Like, I was really, really working. And, you know, all these guys are probably driving at like 6/10, if that. And they were like, wow, that car handles great. I'm like, yeah, but you guys are fine. Like, in your supercars, everybody, you got out, there were roses in the air and everybody was smiling. I was sweating. Like, I was just abused. And it's like we were at that point where the old stuff is still wonderful, where I thoroughly love and enjoy it, and it makes me feel great. God, to your point, it's work. It is a real lot of work to pilot these cars. And even if you're trying to pilot them at any semblance of speed, right, you have to be so on your game, because like you said, you can lock the brakes, they can step out from you. There's no safety in those cars at all. Like, if you bend it, you probably bend it. Like, it's your fault.
But then the positive side of that, and the side that keeps me coming back to old cars and, keeps me happy to be driving my own stuff, even when I for work get to drive such amazing new stuff, is that you feel such a sense of accomplishment.
I know. From
not binning it, I mean, even just, a successful drive to the grocery store in the 81 Trans Am. It's like, it started today and fine. I didn't, nobody
didn't overheat.
It didn't overheat. Yeah. I got, 10 thumbs up and, 6 vocal compliments. And so I come home feeling like I achieved something, even though all I did was drive to the store. Last week I did an off-road drive. I'm going to write a column about it.
Okay.
On driver, and it was a class from a man named Ken Cameron, who normally teaches military off-road training. So is like expeditionary vehicle control. So that's like how to get a car across a place that maybe isn't intended for a car in one piece, and he's starting to do these civilian classes. So he brought a couple of us over, and it was so fun. It was great. We were in Moab, we were in Arches area.
Yeah.
The vehicles that we were driving were so early 2000s Land Rovers.
Okay.
Different years. And they were, it's a very capable vehicle, obviously. It's a fairly modern vehicle compared to what we've been talking about. But compared to the off-road vehicles that you can get right now at the dealer, they didn't have any off-road modes. A low gear and a high gear.
Right, sure. Yeah.
They didn't even have a locking differential, any of that stuff. Nothing like, say the new Bronco. And I've done a fair amount of off-road driving, but this was it wasn't the most challenging. That was probably the Rebel, just because there were a lot of other elements in Rebel that were really hard. But vehicle-wise, I learned so much from the vehicle not being able to do things unless I did them. The line that I picked mattered. The throttle control that I had mattered. My use of throttle and brake and balancing them and moving and steering correctly. There was all stuff where if I had a locker and crawl mode, I could have just been like drinking a beer while the thing crawled itself up the hill.
Totally.
It's not how you should off-road.
We don't do that. No one would ever do that. So, no one would ever do that. Yeah.
But again, at the end of it, I was exhausted and I felt awesome. I felt like Superwoman. It was very, very cool.
I think, we grew up in that generation, or at least I know I did, where it was not having any age really kind of taught us how to drive, right? Like growing up in the Northeast, we loved snow, we loved mud, we loved rain, because that meant if you had anything rear wheel drive, you were sliding. Every corner was a drift, right? Every dirt patch was a donut, everything. And now it's so difficult to kind of do that stuff. But I really do think it taught us not only the fundamentals of driving as a kid, but it taught us how to get out of stuff. Right. So, if a car went into a slide, you knew how to correct it. You knew which way you point that steering wheel. You could actually feel where the adhesion of the tires were via the amount of brakes, pressure you put on the brake pedal. And now, to your point, it's very difficult. And I kind of have a problem with that. And I never want to sound like an asshole, but I know I always do, because I'm like, new cars do everything for you people, and you don't know how to drive. You just know how to steer, and that's it. And you don't even have to steer these days. I'm trying to sound like an old man on his lawn.
Well, I mean, it's a challenge to think about what I want from cars, right? Because it is important. Like, it's great that there's more safety, like it's great that when there's a problem, the cars can catch people and keep them from hurting themselves, keep them from hurting other people. I'm not against it.
Not at all.
I want people to enjoy their car and feel safe in it. And I know that not everybody wants to suffer, I mean, it is a very,
and it is a very weird thing for me to drive a car and be like, this car is fine, but I would like it better if it was more flawed. But I do tend to gravitate towards cars that have like just a little difficulty in them, I mean, it's like people too, it's like the grumps and the grouches, like people who are a little too shy and awkward in social situations. So, maybe it's, it's really about kind of having a reason that they need me. I enjoy driving a car that needs me to drive it, because that's what a great statement that is. What a fabulous point that is, because I think that is so true. Like you said, going in the Trans Am, like it didn't overheat, it didn't do this. I feel like everything you do in an old car is a mini victory, right? Regardless of how, like when we were on this rally last week, I mean, I just dumped an enormous amount of money into the Charger to make it just okay. Right? It doesn't matter how you can put hundreds of thousands of dollars into a vehicle, it'll only be just okay. And as we're going, we had just put new belts on it, and like it's got AC for the first time in 20 years since I've owned it, and it's but all of a sudden, like we're ripping it up, and I put the AC on, and the belt was squealing like a son of a bitch, and I was like, God damn it, because it's a brand new belt, it loosened up, and I was like, oh shit. But it was one of those things where because I didn't bring any tools with me, I go to an AutoZone or wherever I went, I bought a ratchet set, went in, loosened the alternator, correct, gorilla armed it up, tightened it back, everything was fixed, right? And it was fine, and it ran beautifully for the rest of the time. But still, the car needed me to do that. And I really like that. And it always gives me a little sense of accomplishment and or achievement when I can do tiny things that get me to where I need to go. And I think now with the new cars, it's always it's like you just know you're going to make it, right? Like you're going to get there. You could rent the worst rental car on the planet, you're still going to get there. It could have like a thimble full of oil, you'll probably still make it.
Yeah.
So
it's nice to be needed.
It is. It really is. Well, it's funny because I know that I want to talk a little bit about, and Lana and I have been talking about this. We want to do an old 4x4. Some kind of video between us, because Elana has one of the prettiest and best condition, I believe it's an 84 Ram Charger Prospector, right?
Yes. Right. Did you see me just go back into the?
I did. I saw the eyes roll a little bit and be like, is that what I have? Yeah, that's what you have. Yeah. But it's such a clean, great example of kind of one of the early SUVs, right? And that SUV is actually really loaded. It's 360, still carbureted, power windows, cruise control. Like that's a pretty well optioned, big bully, SUV for back in the day. And I've got an old my 96 Bronco, right? And I was watching one of the videos that you and Tom did, and it's so funny because the power windows, and they both have power windows in these things, are the fastest and probably most dangerous power windows.
They're so scary.
That anyone, like and I truly believe this, like if you put a finger in there and you hit that button and leave it, like I want to try it with a hot dog. I'm gonna put a hot dog in there and see what happens.
It's gonna be
Because,
like being bitten by one of those big parrots. It's gonna take the tip right off.
It's like some of the things you're like, wow, this is kind of modern, and then you're like, this is terrifying. Like if given the opportunity, it will kill you. But again, those big, kind of big old full size SUVs are still fairly analog. They still feel like these big lumbering lumps of metal that are cruising down the highway, and they're not really good at anything, but they look good. You always get compliments on them. They still are very fun to drive, even though like 75 is like max, as fast as you kind of want to go. But yeah, I absolutely adore them, and they still make me feel wonderful every time I get in them. And I think that's what kind of keeps me from buying anything new. But you at Car and Driver drive a lot of new stuff. You are always road testing things that every time I see it, my jaw's on the floor. I'm like, she's driving that, damn it. And I'm very, very jealous of that. But what have you driven recently, or over the last year, that still gives you somewhat of an analog experience, or a simulated analog experience? Would that be a better way to phrase it?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we're kind of this whole time through, we're sort of using analog as like not quite by its literal meaning, right? Because sometimes things have electronics and stuff, whatever. That what we mean by an analog experience is sort of an experience that moves from one point forward or backwards, but like doesn't have a lot of interference coming in.
A lot of fluff.
So I did just drive the BMW M2, which
sure,
little guy, little coupe, and manual, very nice, very modern car.
Yep.
The discussion of what BMW is doing with its exteriors is for a different podcast.
Yeah, wow.
It's a funny, puffy looking car, but it is a very pleasurable car to drive. It probably partially, maybe even mostly, because it is a manual. So even the most modern manual with all of its roll control and like stall prevention, you still have to do something. You can't totally forget that you're responsible for at least one element of the driving experience. And that was a fun car. I enjoyed that, and did a pretty long road trip in it. We've been working on our EV of the Year issue. So that'll be out probably by the time that this podcast is. And so that was very interesting, because those cars are very much the opposite of what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So far, there hasn't really been an electric car that I've driven that has given me all of the feelings that I would like to be getting from a automobile, although there are some that are very fast.
Yeah.
There are some that have lovely driving characteristics, drive and stuff. So that it has been interesting to sort of figure out, what do I want from this, and then okay, if I'm in a car that's so quiet, what makes it fun now? I'm kind of used to expecting a certain level of interference, like background noise from a car.
Sure.
And that helps me get in the mindset for driving, right?
Sure.
Like, okay, it's just the tiniest bit distracting, like a white noise kind of.
Yeah.
And then it clears my mind for the rest of driving. And in EVs, it's like, man, you're sitting there, you're like, I think I can tell like each tone that the tire tread makes, like it's you end up like, I don't know, kind of focusing on the wrong details, because you need the distraction of.
Do you like? Are you in a way? Are you kind of like in a petrol powered car? What every sound is for the most part, right? Whether it's exhaust valve, train transmission, whatever the case is. So are you trying in the EVs in your mind, trying to kind of deconstruct every sound and be like, ooh, what's this? What's that?
There
What's
are
this?
a lot of really weird sounds that come from them, and it's and I don't recognize any of them. I mean, first of all, there is a lot of wind noise. I mean, not wind noise in the way that you normally think of it as being like a leak and a whistle.
Yeah.
you can hear the car moving through the atmosphere, right? Because there's no
Right.
other sound muffling it. And then they have a lot of, I guess maybe coolers and I don't know, solenoids. Is that a thing? Like I can hear some
Sure. Like
clicking,
relays clicking, like
clicking and burbling, especially when you turn them on and off. And there's like stuff that's still kind of doing whatever it's supposed to do
yeah.
to make sure that all of the elements are at the right temperature. The brakes
Hmm.
in EVs make weird noises. Like
Yep.
you sometimes you can tell when it's going from from like a regen to the physical pad.
Hmm.
It's by like a clicking sound, a different
Yeah.
sound. And sometimes it pops a little when it comes back up. So that has been maybe a little bit off topic, but it's been interesting.
Yeah.
It's also unfamiliar. And I think that part of
Right.
what I like about an older car is that for the most part, something weird is going to sound and smell the same way as something weird does on every other car.
Right. 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 Well, I wonder as time goes by with all the new technology, if kind of the new crop of enthusiasts gets as in tune with the new vehicles as we are with the old vehicles, where they're going to be able to differentiate between some kind of relay slash EV noise. Like if this isn't working correctly, they're going to be like, oh, that's the infarctor in the back seat or whatever the hell, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know, or something like that. You just make stuff up. Because I think that's one of the best parts about driving, right? Is to I think it's very easy to get lost in an EV, not in the physical sense, just in your own head, because it is quiet and it's made to kind of make you be in this tranquil environment that just gets you silently from point A to point B and be very relaxing. But every one that I've ever driven, I still find myself trying to decipher little things about it. And I don't know if that's just the enthusiast side of me, or it's just I kind of want to figure out, even though I will never be able to figure out how it works.
Yeah, I mean, I'm positive that there will be people to whom all of that tech is going to look super, just like totally make sense to them. And the under plastic on a Cadillac Blackwing is not going to make sense to them because they'll just have never been in one. I mean, even to come back to this 1915, when we first opened the hood, which you open from the side with like little toggles, already very unfamiliar. I mean, obviously there are things where I'm like, okay, that's the engine, those are the spark plugs, that's a pulley, but you're kind of looking at it. It takes you a while to be like, is that the carburetor? That like weird brass and glass thing?
Yeah, right.
Like, what does this do? And is that supposed to be leaking? And like, answer yes. So and this car was at one point, like the muscle car behind me was at one point totally modern and too complicated for somebody who'd grown up in this car, right? So we'll move through and we'll as a people develop new skills and new things to love about whatever the technology is that we're going, because it really doesn't, like, the main thing that I love about cars is going somewhere in them.
Of course.
And I just did a drive up by you up in Northern California on Highway 1, and it was in an electric SUV, and not maybe the vehicle that I would personally choose for a road trip, but did it stop me from having a wonderful time? Absolutely not. Like, it's just easy to pull off to the side of the road in that car. I would go visit a lighthouse. I stopped and petted a cat. I had like a lot of snacks, so that part, they still do the same job, the real job that they're supposed to do.
Right. So do you think just, being in tune with the old cars and stuff, do you think that makes you appreciate, and I don't know how to word this, like, driving the old cars all the time, like we do, and then you get into the new EVs and even the new supercars and everything like that. I understand that, yes, there's 100% of an appreciation there, because you can't not appreciate the engineering and the technology that goes into new vehicles. But can you see yourself developing a relationship with the new vehicles, and say the same way that you have a relationship with the Opal or the Trans Am, where, you know, it's like it because we all know they do become a part of your personality, right?
I mean, me personally, do you, is that
Or yeah, I mean, because I know for me it's very difficult, right? Like
Mhm.
I get in new cars and I drive them and I'm like, oh, this is great, this is nice. And I do thoroughly enjoy them, but I never feel like I'm, you know, like, oh, I can't wait. Like I'm like, this is something that I want to keep forever, right? Um,
yeah, I hear you. Uh, I think that my relationship to newer cars, even cars that I like very, very much, like Hellcats or
mhm,
you know, like ZL1 Camaro,
sure.
McLaren 765. Uh, I think that I could best describe that relationship as sort of like friendly professional. Like I like them
Okay.
much. I respect their skills. I want to spend time with them.
Mhm.
But then the relationship that I have with the older cars is more like friends, family, pets, you know, like I love them. I love them because
Yeah.
they uh they have problems that I can help them with. I will go out of my way for them. I will put myself in, you know, into
Arm's way.
an uncomfortable position for them. Like like they because uh they're gonna offer me a chance to sort of get away from all the day-to-day mess that's in my head, you know, because they are so distracting and they are so encompassing, like of all of your attention, you know, like there's no um, you you just sort of have to pay attention to what you're doing at the time. And I assume that that's, you know, like what people who exercise feel about running or something like that, you know, you you have to pay attention to what your body's doing, and therefore your mind has to stop going over like the dumb thing that you said years ago that no one else remembers.
I couldn't agree with that more. I love the analogy where it's like the older stuff is like friends and family that you want to be around. You know, that's I think that's 100% correct. I really, really do. So let me ask you this. What are you working on now for Car and Driver? Give us some stuff that you've driven lately that you've loved, or that you've driven that you really haven't loved, or, you know, I don't know if you can say the stuff you haven't loved. I understand that position, but what have you driven that you've been like, you know what, this was a surprise. This was fun. This was good.
Well, so some of it is, you know, coming out in the next issue. Like I said, we did our EV of the year testing, so there were some cars there that I was surprised that I liked. I very much like the BMW i7, which is like a
Okay.
crazy luxury vehicle, 100% opposite of everything we've been talking about.
Right.
Four massaging seats, movie theater in the back, it plays music as you accelerate, like doors open and shut for themselves. You know, it'll probably do your taxes and write birthday notes to all of your family. And
Right.
seats are made of cashmere. It's like being hugged by a fisherman in one of those white sweaters. It's fabulous. So that was fun. There were also some of the EVs in that list that I very much didn't like. I thought that some were surprises, some weren't, but some of the companies are not. You can tell that they don't want to do it, and it's showing in the cars, right?
Interesting.
They're just not offering. If you're going to do an EV, you got to give people what an EV can give them, right? You know, you
Yeah.
give them range and impressive acceleration and maybe a lot of kind of cool gadgetry. And there are
Hmm.
some that just aren't doing any of that. Very disappointing. There are some new companies that just haven't got it worked out yet. Building cars is hard. We're really seeing that with all the startups.
Yep.
So that was interesting. I'll be writing a story about the off-road experience that I had, which I'm very
Okay.
excited. Very much recommend people look up. Cam Mobility is the name of that project and or that program, and I learned so much. And then it's racing season, Mike. So next
Hmm.
week I'm going to the Indy 500, and the week after I'm
Oh,
going to Le Mans. So
are you really? Oh my God, I'm so jealous.
you should be.
Really? Wow, man.
That's going to be
That's awesome.
yeah.
Have you ever been before?
I have been twice. Speaking of analog and less analog experiences, the first time I went was with Hot Rod. I had no media pass. I had never been there. I had no fancy chateau to stay in. I slept in a car. I hung out with drunk Germans.
Perfect.
It was
Sounds
the
great.
last year that Viper raced. And then the next time that I went, it was with Ford for the first year that the Ford GT raced. And I was on a big fancy press trip. I had
Right.
like hospitality and the chateau and, rides around the track if I wanted them, and interviews with, with people. And I don't know, it's kind of hard to beat that first time. Although
Sounds
I definitely appreciated some of the luxuries of the second time.
So so now I'm going to throw this one at you. How is going to the Indy 500 from just a experience perspective different than Le Mans?
Oh, I am not going to answer that because I'm going to write a column about it.
Oh, so fair enough. That's a solid point. And that column will be in Car and Driver in the upcoming months, I'm assuming. So,
but there are no bad races. There is no bad day at the races unless you're in a car that's losing. So that's why you should just go and watch everybody else. You'll have a good day.
that's solid. All right, fair enough. So, all right. So, like we said, give everybody your social channels. And before we split, tell us what is coming up aside from the Car and Driver stuff. What's coming up in your garage? What's coming up on your YouTube channel that everybody should tune into and watch? Give us the lowdown.
Yes. Okay. So all of my social channels are Challenge Her. So that is Twitter, which I'm not very active on, and Instagram and YouTube. The Challenge Her channel on YouTube is me and my husband, Tom. It should really be Challenge Them. He does a lot of and so you can see the 1915 Dodge, you can see the Ram Charger that Mike was talking about, you can see this Nova project. We're probably going to do some videos on some Caprice cop cars that we got. And so those will be coming up. Tom built an incredible fastener storage tray, with a whole bunch of little toolboxes to store all of our nuts and bolts. So we might do a round of that if you're interested in garage improvement. We are trying not to buy anything else. Oh man, we bought a V8 60 engine. So probably gonna have to build a car to put it in. That's like the little flathead. I don't know, dude. We're at 23 cars. It's a problem. It's a problem.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, so come on the YouTube channel. You can tell me I have a problem. So, I know.
That is fantastic, Elana. As always, it's always wonderful to have you on. It's always wonderful to see you. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm telling you, you are doing yourselves a disservice if you don't read Elana's columns in Car and Driver and you don't check out her YouTube channel and her Facebook page and Instagram. Oh wait, Facebook? Did we say that?
Oh, Facebook is just Elana, but I don't really.
You don't care?
I
don't care.
I like to talk to my auntie on Facebook.
Oh, that's fine. All right, so the hell with that. All right, YouTube, Instagram, and occasional Twitter. That's where we want to go. So, all right, Elana, thank you again. It is always a pleasure. And that's it. Any parting thoughts, words of wisdom for anybody out there?
Check out antique cars, guys. They're really cheap and it's a lot of fun. You want to experience some of what Mike and I are talking about. You can't afford a Charger, get yourself a Dodge Brothers. It's like a tenth of the cost.
Fair enough. All right, very good. Folks, that's it. And we'll see you next time on the Hot Rod Barbecue.
Thanks, Mike.
Thanks for listening, folks. And again, please subscribe to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast. If you're on Spotify, check us out there. Subscribe to it on iTunes. And if you are going to go to YouTube, make sure you go to the Hot Rod Barbecue podcast and hit that subscribe button. And we'll come to you every week.